people can join. It's screen sharing by Zoom, so if anyone joins in.
All good. So, hello, marine people mostly, but we're Aotearoa Lakes, and doing the names we work on lakes and freshwater stuff. So I know this is going to be a little bit out of the ordinary for marine folk, but we dive a lot, so there's that common connection going on there. So just a bit of a story around who we are and how it all fits together. So in 2017, we started up a little project at Lake Poopaki under Project Baseline, and a few of you may be familiar with what Project Baseline is, but it's a US-based environmental NGO that focuses on using divers and citizen science to document underwater environments, but in a very basic fashion. So we began just doing normal stuff like we're taking visibility readings, we were noting certain physical and biological observations, and that project started growing rapidly. Out of that, we decided to move into more lakes and expand, but the angle we wanted to take on this was going to be slightly different to some of the existing groups. So a lot of groups would have a big community drive, and they'll do a lot of very accessible things to communities. So riparian planting, litter cleanups, that sort of stuff. We wanted to approach this from a different perspective, where the biggest cost to any environmental project is consulting services and professional services. So why not put together a team of practicing scientists, consultants, and technical divers, and we can do this work for free and provide professional environmental services to anyone who needs. So basically, we're a team of ecologists, water quality scientists, we've got GIS analysts and drone operators, a team of technical and scientific divers, data analysts, marketing people, lawyers, graphic designers, and like some of the more peripheral business needs stuff. So our projects generally aim at getting some sort of tangible outcome. So again, there's a lot of community groups doing a lot of advocacy and awareness. We wanted to go that step further. So we try to align all of our projects with either existing national policy that provides some obligatory framework for regional councils to manage their freshwater environments. So we align with policy objectives as well as with councils' regional plans and objectives. And this is around just trying to make sure that we can support existing projects that are funded so that there is an outcome from all of the data that we're finding. We work with CRIs like NIWA and Cawthron, landowners, local government council, obviously, other NGOs like EMR, Whitebaiting Connection, that sort of thing. University students, a lot of you have helped out in the past, volunteer technical divers, and all sorts of other people like schools, a recent one for us too. So what do we do? So we offer advice to community groups and a suite of consulting services, so everything from catchment management plans and restoration plans to habitat mapping, biodiversity management, all of that kind of bread and butter consulting stuff. And then for councils, we offer very targeted in-lake biodiversity habitat assessments, water quality assessments, targeted monitoring plans, and restoration options. So our current project, Poopaki, was the first project and it's kind of in limbo. So this project started off in 2017, has been going ever since, but we've achieved all of the outcomes from the project, and right now we have delivered a full options assessment to council, and it's sitting with them in terms of how to fund the restoration or management on the back end of this. So COVID hit, obviously, so there's not a lot of money to spend for something that isn't really a public-facing issue right now. So the lake's still recreationally safe to swim in and use, so no alarm bells. They're not really wanting to spend millions of dollars on it. But to give you an idea of what we've done here, we've pretty much clocked between 2017 to 2019, we've done probably about 2 dives a month in that lake. So that's heaps and heaps of man hours, and it's collected everything from visibility. There's a little visibility rig that's actually still in the lake if you want to go and have a swim about. But we've installed a series of continuous water quality monitoring sensors, maxified transects. We've done a whole lot of nutrient fractionation studies through sediments at different depths. And what we've built up was a baseline assessment of lake condition. So that's water quality, sediment chemistry, in-lake biodiversity, pest incursions, and stratification profiles through the seasons. From this, we've identified the key drivers for decline and the key actions that could be taken, or at least restoration pathways that could be investigated to try and sort some of these things out. But I mean, expectation management, the best we're aiming for is to keep the lake status quo. Anything above that is really, it's an unrealistic expectation because this lake's internally driven. Lake Rototoa is probably the most relatable project we have. So freshwater mussels are globally in decline. New Zealand species are in that same setup. So they're on the brink. They've been listed by NIWA as one of the species that will be most prone to climate change in the not so distant future. So Lake Rototoa, I don't know, has anyone been there? Beautiful lake, and you hop in and you'll go for a wander or even a snorkel and you'll see beds like the one in the top left corner. And it looks all awesome. Like the first recon dive we did there, we mapped out about 1 kilometer of continuous mussel bed. Everything seemed awesome. And then we came back to do a proper survey and we were ranging between 86 and 95% mortality rates. So densities were about 42 mussels per square meter on all of the beds that we've mapped thus far. Average mortality rate was, I think, 86%. So huge, huge decline. We're also finding very limited size classing. So all of the adults, well, actually all of the individuals we found in this lake was 51 mils and up. So we only had 3 representative size classes, all of which full mature adults. So no juvenile recruitment, no reestablishment of beds. It's basically just catastrophic decline. And what's bizarre about this is the council and NIWA and the likes have been monitoring water quality in this lake since the 80s. So there's a solid 30+ year record of water quality showing indeterminate trends. So clearly there's a decoupling between water quality and ecological responses. And that's kind of what we wanted this project to highlight, that you really need other sort of in-lake ecological response metrics to anthropogenic stress rather than just your stereotypical nutrient profiles through time. So the Kakehi survey stuff, we've developed a method that we want to roll out nationally. We've built a metric that we can use reliably and repeatably. As part of this, we did habitat surveys. So we're creating a model that we can try and predict Kakehi densities and locations based on basic lake bathymetry and substrate type. So bathymetry is kind of something that most councils will have for a lot of their high profile lakes. So if we can try and pin magnified extent and bathymetry to densities, we can refine surveys basically and trim the process down from many, many days to hopefully a small amount. Lake Tamarata, I'll let Maddison touch on.
Good day, everyone. My name is Maddison. Who of you guys have been to Lake Tamarata? I feel like I saw no hands in Rototoa or Tamarata. You guys need to go to more lakes. Lake Tamarata is up north near Te Arai. Surely you guys have been marine people, but to Te Arai. Yeah, okay, there's some nods, yeah. So it's the lake just before that surf club. And it's a pretty awesome special lake. It's not huge, but it's surrounded by peat wetland. So it's naturally a more orange-brown stained lake. We have a lot of work going on in this area. As you can see in that top left photo, we're working with the council doing continuous water quality monitoring for the next year. So we've got a whole rig line set up that's taking a whole range of parameters. I'll get into what that's informing in a second. We've got full biodiversity surveys that the divers have done. So that includes looking at Kakehi, as we said, but also the macrophytes. So it was a misconception that this lake has been devoid of any plants for quite a while, and the divers got in there and found out that's actually not true, and that some of the faster survey methods were missing quite a lot of the lake biodiversity. So that's a really awesome outcome to have found that this lake actually does have quite a lot worth protecting. We are working with a GIS guy there to do wetland mapping. So he's basically making, I'm going to let Ebi actually explain the map because I feel like I can't explain it that well, but he's basically making a full map that eventually you can zoom in, and I feel like you're going to be better explaining this one.
Yeah, what we were trying to do here, the wetland and the lake had always been studied separately. So we've got the bathymetry. So we flew a georeference grid across there and created a 3-point cloud coupled with that bathymetry. So you can create a 3D environment of the wetland and lake in one single georeference platform. So the idea with this is that we'll have all of the wetland data and the lake data. So water quality, biodiversity, everything. Hopefully it'll be open access at some point. So if you see a bit in there or whatever, you can plug that information in. So anyone pulls this up on our website, you have all of that system data in one spot with quality codes, georeferenced, and a whole lot of information how it was collected. And the idea is that through time, as data feeds this model, we can start building up a lacustrine ecosystem model. So we can try and predict if there are issues with eutrophication, if we remove a specific nutrient, like if we completely scrap total phosphorus, what are the trophic consequences of that? Or if there's a specific pest species, if we knock that section of the food web out, what are the cascading issues from there? And we can manage the lake better.
So that's what the sensors are. Thanks, I can't explain the map thing. That's what the sensors are informing. So it's basically just a preliminary study that we're supporting council with to help us understand if we can use certain mechanisms to take out a layer of the food web, basically to control pest fish. Lake Kowhai, this is my favorite. This is a lake up in Southhead, and it is completely private access. So no one has ever been there that we're aware of. There's one lovely old lady that does bird counts. But other than that, it was wildly unexplored. And what's so special about this lake, we hope, fingers crossed, is that there's no pest fish in it. So basically, one guy single-handedly went across and put pest fish in basically every lake in Auckland, most in Northland, and quite a lot of Waikato. And we're thinking he may not have got to this lake. So we've been there underwater once, and we've noticed no signs of pest fish or any fish actually at all. And we will be doing eDNA work with the council this Friday to do further studies. And then the other really exciting thing about this lake is you can see these big native charophyte beds, and there's only one species of pest macrophyte in there. So one of the projects we have this year in June is we're going to send the divers in, and they're going to hand remove all of the pest macrophyte. It is no easy feat, and I don't think we're going to get it done in the first go, but if we have a 5-year plan to do continual removal using the different seasons, then we should hopefully be able to be one of the first pest-free lakes in the Upper North Island. And I don't think there's a case study in New Zealand of someone removing pest species from a lake, so it's going to be a completely trial thing, especially when we're making the point that, hey, we're a community group doing this in our own time. If we can remove pests from a lake, then all regional authorities need to. So yeah, that's one really awesome thing about this lake.
Yeah, this is it.
Pictures.
Yeah, so just highlighting some of the other stuff that we've done through time to support council's management of Auckland's lakes specifically. So that middle picture, that was a collaborative project that we ended up getting Cawthron to donate their time for free, and council picked up the bill for the analysis, but we wanted to understand what was the principal reason for that lake becoming more and more eutrophied. It was blooming every summer, pretty much. It turns chocolatey brown. Most of you who died would have been in here, and it's pretty shite, right? And it's getting worse, and it's been pretty shit for a long time. So obviously it's not a catchment issue because the catchment's fully urbanized and there's been no agriculture in the catchment for decades. So we wanted to get an understanding of where the nutrients are coming from. So we took a series of sediment cores from various depths in different environments, and we did center nutrient or phosphorus fractionation. So that was just phosphorus remobilization from the sediment across various DO and pH gradients. And what we ended up finding is that that lake is pretty much self-driven. So you can stop all nutrient input into this lake permanently, and it's not going to stop. It's going to continue declining at its current trajectory. But what was important about this is it gave you an understanding of where the phosphorus pools in the lake were. So if you were to manage nutrients in this lake, which is actually still something they're investigating, you'd need to know that to calculate dose rates and an appropriate application strategy. This information would have cost the council hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, to put into perspective, scientific diver doing this sort of stuff at those depths would have probably cost about $450 an hour. And we had a team of 4 of us over 2 days, probably about 6 hours of in-water time per day. So the cost is massive, and that's excluding the analysis and everything else. So it's pretty big thing. And we do a whole lot of other stuff to support them in terms of in-lake biodiversity assessments that are too costly as well.
So some of the other things that we're trying to do is, I guess, make lakes sexy. No one really thinks about lakes or cares about lakes. So we're trying to make lakes more relatable and for people to really want to connect with lakes. So just raising awareness and educating people on how lakes are different to stream water bodies and the marine environment. They're a lot of the time, as Ebi said, internally driven, which means that sometimes the actions we're doing on the riparian yard of a lake aren't going to affect inlake. And that's why it's all the more important to protect the lakes that are currently in okay health, because lakes do get to a point where once they're at a certain stage, they tip. And I haven't heard of anyone being able to reverse that after that tipping point. So this is a graphic designer that we work with, and he's really amazing. And he helped us create an infographic all about what we've read and written and studied for Lake Rototoa, and that's in a kind of digestible 450-word story. And then this kākahi poster so that people could understand the threats to kākahi in a more digestible way, I guess. So that's something that we're really trying to breach into a bit more. We've done quite a few education events now. We're starting to rack up talks, and we've got an education event up in Northland next week. And we're just trying to spread the word about caring about lakes as much as possible. Achievements. So this is funny because it's a bit of an outdated achievement thing, but yeah, Project Baseline got nominated for a Mayoral Conservation Award, and then Aotearoa Lakes did last year, which is pretty awesome. As Ebi said, the kākahi monitoring program, that's a pretty big achievement in my opinion, because it's a community group designing a method that far supersedes a lot of other methods used.
So yeah, it's the first survey of its kind in New Zealand. So NIWA typically do single transit randomized surveys. So chuck out 3 or 4 points, whereas ours is a full stratified survey that includes habitat assessment and a whole series of things which NIWA would now start adopting. So we're working with them to do some stuff in Wellington using that method.
Global support. So as part of the Project Baseline initiative, we have people from basically all around the whole world that we're in contact with, and we offer advice. California, England, quite a few people. Time zones are always tricky, but it just shows that we're hopefully cultivating environmental awareness, and that people are wanting to share their knowledge with us and us with them. Lake Poopaki's up here as an achievement because it was such a large undertaking. As Ebi explained, it was basically a project from beginning to end with a full intervention package and everything about the lake written up and presented by us. So that's pretty impressive. And yeah, that made it the most successful Project Baseline, and we've had multiple publications. Coming soon. The new unexplored lake, this is not updated, sorry, is actually the lake we're going to go and remove the pest plants from. So that was Lake Kowhai, so that's really exciting. We're hoping to spread our surveys across the region, but to be honest with you, it's a lot of work. And we both have full-time jobs. Actually, everyone we work with does it only in their weekends, full-time jobs. Nearly everyone donates their job skill in the weekend as well. So we're basically asking them to work out of work. But we are hoping to work with, well, we're already starting to work with Wellington. We're hoping to work with Bay of Plenty, and we're going up to Northland to discuss things next week. So it's definitely going to start spreading out across the country. New technologies and approaches. So obviously the survey methods are new. Some other things we're really hoping to get off the ground is installing cameras that are going to be trigger motivated, so we can see rats diving in and getting the kākahi and have some more relatable content, I guess. It's a lot easier for someone to understand, oh, awesome, a rat eats this, then, oh, you know, there's this lack of algae here, and then that causes this. You know, if there's a direct predator, it's a lot easier for people to understand. And yeah, just creating the regional baseline assessment of lake biodiversity. That's not done.
Yeah, some of this is a wee bit out of date. Like some of the other cool things that we're working on, we've partnered up with NIWA to do a genetic distribution assessment for kakahi across, well, at least in the North Island to start with. So we'll be taking genetic swabs for them and shell samples where they're going to be using stable isotopes to age them better, because we don't have a full handle on their age versus size. So right now people are just assuming anything above 51 mil is pretty much 25 to 30. Anything above that 75 mil is probably up to 50 years old. But that's not based on any real evidence. So the isotope tracking will hopefully, or the isotope tracing through the shells will hopefully provide a little bit more concrete evidence for that stuff.
It's nice. So I guess before we get into questions, usually this talk is a little bit more doom and gloom. We kind of run them on the fly. We don't have a pre-written script or anything. We clearly don't even update the slides. But yeah, usually it's a little bit more doom and gloom because a lot of focus is on Rototoa and how everything's dead. So right now is the point where I say, spread the word, please, like think about either studying lakes. I can see freshwater over there. Either studying lakes or just getting involved in some form of community science. It doesn't have to be with us, but community science really does hold a place for making action and change. I think we have to have mass buy-in to put pressure on anyone to do anything. So if we don't all work together to get mass buy-in, then other things are always going to take precedence. So roading and that kind of thing are always going to be the key thing that council and government in general think about if we don't push that we want to look after our freshwater ecosystems and our marine ecosystems better. Any diving plugs that you'd like to add in?
The diving conditions are fabulous, by the way. It's crystal clear, 20 meters viz. It's beautiful.
Warm.
It's warm.
Easy access.
Yeah, it's great. It's when you're cutting twin sets through the bush. But yeah, if you do, I mean, the diving side of things, all the funny stuff aside, it does actually provide you with heaps of skills that you may use later on in life. So there's a lot of line work, a lot of survey techniques, habitat mapping, that sort of stuff. So yeah, people are keen to go down that road.
And we're trying to, I guess, what's the word? Spread out. It's not the right word, but spread out and get different skills. So if you can see we've given the spiel and you're like, hey, you guys really need to do better in this. For example, a lot of people have told us we need to make it more understandable and communicate better. So we've started to make infographics, and some people have said we need to have more art, and we're working with graphic designers and artists that's recording the sound of hydrogen sulfide layers for an art show. I don't know, but we're trying to cast our web as wide as we can to get as many people interested in the lake. So if you guys have any suggestions, that's the number one thing that we love from these talks is, hey, you guys should really do this because it would really help. I think the other day we had someone tell us that we should make a board game, which is a pretty cool suggestion, like a lake biodiversity board game. So I'm not sure how that would work, and kids books, which is actually one that I took seriously. So, but yeah, any questions?
I have a question. In the Kowhai Lake photos, it looks like there's something cloudy in it. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah,
I'm just gonna go back.
It's pretty cool because, and that's something we hopefully want to write up with one of our mates from the University of Waikato. So that is, well, we first assumed it was hydrogen sulfide, but it's one more down. There we go. Yeah, so that smoky stuff is just sulfur precipitate. So there's a few reasons. Well, we've got a few reasons why we think that's happening. So one, we think it may be from anoxic water upwelling from the aquifer, and then it hits toxic water, oxidizes, precipitates out. The other thing that we're thinking it may be is just excessive decomposition of the plants as they fall down. Like, these are pretty dense, so you get a decent, pretty much understory of dying and decaying plant material. And that decomposition is triggering anoxia and then sulfur precipitate. But what's cool about this is typically New Zealand has always measured its charophyte beds from where they start on the shore till the deepest depth they go down to, and that's a magnified extent, and that's it. And all management is focused on that deepest extent moving backward. What we're seeing here is that there could be a different way for macrophyte recession, and you're ending up with these pools of anoxic sulfur precipitate in the middle of the bed, so you're actually causing bed fragmentation, and you may see charophyte recession being driven from inside the beds rather than from the outer extent inward. So if you are managing stuff, you potentially, in shallow lakes, people have been measuring that deepest extent and claiming that those charophyte beds have been healthy for years but haven't really looked further into the bed. It could be receding from the bank back in. So that's pretty cool little setup. So far we still haven't found anyone who's really documented this in New Zealand. So that's a pretty cool setup.
It's something we definitely didn't expect to see in a shallow lake.
Yeah.
For a second, I thought you meant the surface scum. And I was going to say that's cyanobacteria, and I learned that the very, very hard way in the A&E.
There are risks associated.
Yes, you have to sign a disclaimer. Any other questions?
We still have a little while until pizza rice.
Oh, we did the abridged.
Yeah, maybe you guys can tell us about some of the threats that our lakes face and some of the animals, like the Poopaki, like how do they get to the lakes and maybe how they move around.
Cool.
You or me?
You.
Cool. They assume kaki made it to these closed systems because a lot of these systems don't have an inflow outflow. So they assume the source population was put there by, back in the day, Maori would use them as a good kind of takeaway lunch almost, because you'd wrap them up in wicked baskets and transport them, and they stayed viable for quite a while. And when they got to a new place where there was a freshwater body, you just chuck them in. So that's how we assume this has happened. And part of the genetic stuff we're doing with NIWA is seeing if these geographically isolated populations have actually deviated somewhat from the main genetic type. Well, these are UMSS, which is what we think they are. So we're hoping to see either that all of the species in Northland and probably most of the North Island are in fact the same, or there are these discrete subspecies in lakes. So that's pretty cool.
Some of the threats, I guess, are the same threats that are for most things. So pest fish disrupt their life cycle. So the mussels basically eject the little glaucidia and it attaches to the native fish, and we actually don't know where it goes. We don't know where the young mussels inhabit. I think there's guesses, but no actual known fact. But pest fish eat our native fish, so that disrupts kakahi's life cycle. In general, pest fish are a huge impact for our lakes. So if we're going to talk about lakes in general, pest fish, pest plants, they basically alter everything about lakes. They change the food web, they change the whole structure of the lake. A lot of pest plants, the same as on land, are way more tolerant to harsh conditions underwater, so they tend to overtake our native plants. It's the same story as the land, basically. Pollution is a huge one, so everything that goes into the lake has no way to get out of the lake. So that's probably a huge big difference between lakes and streams, is there's nowhere for it to go. When it's in the lake, it sits in the lake. So it's basically a big sink of contaminants.
And it's not all doom and gloom. So like part of what we're trying to do here is, this is probably not something you guys are particularly interested in, but central government released a set of new freshwater policy. So it's a national policy statement for freshwater management. And as part of that, there's an obligation for regional authorities to manage threatened ecosystems and threatened species. So the problem is no one's looked in lakes, so we assumed it's all fine, so no one bothered to manage them because they're like, oh, is it the threatened ecosystem? It's data deficient, so it's not. It's a really shitty flowchart. So we're building up the information to declare either these ecosystems as threatened or the species within them either nationally threatened or regionally threatened. And the idea is that if you can elevate something to a regional threat status, you then force the hand of regional councils to manage because they're obligated to under command by central government. So this is one of the ways that I feel community groups can look at policy to drive change. Because if you just wave a banner at the council being like, stop mismanaging, no one's going to give a shit, right? Like they'll just look at you and walk on past you, submit oodles and oodles of data, and it'll just sit on someone's desktop. But if you target this strategically, so this is with any of your projects, if you wanted any sort of positive outcome that's driven by government, make it a problem that they can't ignore and they'll be forced to sort it out. And it's not that they don't want to, they really do want to sort it out. It's just there's so many issues, you kind of pick the ones that are most obvious to you. And data deficiency often leads to things being left in the cracks. So Kakahi is one we want to get a distribution map and genetic species ID, so we can then run it through the IUCN criteria for threat status. Same with charophytes and some of the pond weeds that we have in some of the lakes. We're pretty sure they'll be regionally threatened. Hopefully in the next year or two, we can start building all of that stuff together and managing stuff, hopefully.
In Auckland, most of the threats of the lake come down to three things. It's, well, two things: land use and pests. Pretty much all of the lakes are in farmed catchments, which is not the farmer's fault. They didn't know, back in the day that what they did 50 years ago is still going to matter now, but it does. And the pest fish just accelerate how fast that process happens. All of you, this is so far into the talk to us, but all of you know about lakes and lake stratification and that kind of thing? Yeah, okay, cool. That's good. So yeah, obviously you guys understand that system and understand that that's just going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. So
yeah, I think lakes are a good poster child for what happens if you do nothing, because they integrate effects across a geological time scale. Pretty much whatever was in there 100 years ago is still remobilizing now. So yeah, marine environments and streams are maybe less they're less dramatic in their response because the systems are flushed and there's a huge dilution factor, whereas lakes, especially small lakes, whatever you dumped in it before is still there and that just fuels itself. So in our lifetimes, in 20 years, you can see something going from a clear lake that you used to swim into, swimming warnings going up, and it doesn't really take much to tip them. So I think it's a good time capsule or scary time capsule.
I guess one of the main things that we're hoping to achieve with Aotearoa Lakes is, as we said, the council monitored Lake Rototoa for 30 years and didn't detect anything. So clearly water quality and whether something stratifies and whatever's happening on the surface isn't a good indication of what's happening to our species under the water. So really getting an understanding of how those species do react to certain things is a huge goal for us, because it's not really that well studied.
Yeah, and we are working with other councils to try and develop better monitoring practices, because currently regional councils will all monitor things in a relatively standardized way, so you can compare stuff. So MEP will put out these reports that say, lakes in general across New Zealand, it's the condition is that, water quality is this, and so forth. So the problem is that setup now, because regional councils have so much to monitor, it's fairly rapid, and they take discrete water quality samples from the middle of the lake, which is often the part of the lake that's the most stable and the most devoid of life. So all of your littoral zones and your banks is where you've got your highest biodiversity and your biggest fluctuations, but we don't monitor there. So it seems almost nonsensical that the midpoint is where we would do it. And that was purely for logistics sake and was for comparability's sake. And now that we've got 30-year data records for lakes across the country, we're starting to see that these indeterminate trends are not worth the investment. Like if you spend 30 years monitoring this at great cost and you're not actually seeing anything, is it something needs to change? And it's just that the investment to develop these metrics is huge. So we're working, well, Greater Wellington's pretty much on board, Bay of Plenty's pretty supportive, and so is Northland, and trying to get better ecological response metrics for lakes.
Lakes are also going to really suffer through climate change with the droughts, lake water levels. I'm sure you guys have noticed when you've gone to lakes or kind of anywhere lately, the drought is really impacting the lake. So lake water levels are going down. One of the lakes that we go to a lot that we haven't mentioned is called Lake Kirita. And I call it the take it as tribute lake because it's so buggered that I feel like we can do whatever we want to trial on it. But that went from being 3 meters deep to 0.9 this summer. So when you hear 0.9, it's like I can walk around, I can walk across the lake. I'm like Jesus walking across water. So, when we're seeing such drastic changes, we have to really wonder across time what climate change is going to do to these species. And if we're not even able to comprehend and understand what we've done just with contaminants and pest fish, the climate change subject is just a whole unworldly topic.
What about whitebait fishing? You know, all of our lakes getting really degraded. People are still catching fish in the streets. All of that. Same kind of go towards.
I mean, our lakes in
I'm like,
Auckland.
do we have any?
Well, yeah, so-
I don't think so.
So Rototoa is one of those lakes where we think there's a population of giant cockatoos in a stream that feeds a northern arm. We're not considering it as an inflow because it's got a really tiny subcatchment. Like the stream's maybe only a couple of 100 meters long anyway, and the catchment is this tiny patch of native bush in a valley. So we think that there's natives in there, so it's not being whitebaited, but yeah, I think whitebaiting.
That problem's long gone for Auckland lakes. I'm sure it is a problem in some of the other lakes though.
Yeah,
And
our lakes are fairly devoid of any galaxid species now. Pretty much in all Auckland lakes, all you're really going to see in terms of natives would be some eels and common bullies. Much more than that, you'd probably be.
I actually kind of hope like pest fishermen would get in there and try and control the population.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that's probably the other biggest issue. There's a bit of you have to tread lightly politically here, but there's a bit of a disagreement between Fish and Game and scientists, or where they see all of these coarse fish, perch, rudd, tench, all of these as a recreational sports fish. So they want to manage these lakes to support recreational fisheries, but to the detriment of the lake. And I mean, I can't get on board with that because it seems really bizarre that you let a system just continually degrade so you can support a handful of licenses, which no one even buys anyway. Like, we've spoken to heaps of coarse fishermen and half of them didn't even know you needed a license. So I don't understand what level of revenue they're generating from this. But so there's a lot of stigma from Fish and Game going out to coarse fishermen about this idea of a balanced system where eventually coarse fish and natives will find a new equilibrium and that sort of stuff. I see there's a flawed argument. It's like if you mow down a rainforest and put housing up, but each house has a tree, do you find a new rainforest state? No, right? So I find that bizarre to understand, but it makes management of this a lot harder. So we can't just get communities rally to go and continually net these lakes and fish them out because it's technically illegal. So Auckland Council is taking a decent stand on this and have declared a lot of these fish as regional pests. So we have some authority to try and do something about them, but it's only in select spots. So if you see one, kill it, but don't kill it. Basically, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
How did you guys get into your jobs? What kind of roles do you do at Auckland Council?
Job or Aotearoa Lakes?
Jobs like career as a
Career.
scientist.
I feel like I fell into my job by accident, to be honest.
Luck.
I feel like luck, like, man, it's not easy to get a job. I'm probably your guys' age. I'm only 26. I feel super lucky to be like employed with a good job. I got mine from doing a summer internship, which then changed into a political mess for delivering a program that council needed help for, which just made it so I got to extend my contract. So yay. And then I got interested in lakes and started doing the lakes program at the council. And since then I've kind of jumped across into a ecological team to do regulatory and consenting work. And now I'm working with Healthy Waters doing kind of partnership education and local board stuff. So kind of getting more work around educating people and working with people so that I don't forget how to talk to normal people, because I tend to surround myself with people who talk like it. And then all of a sudden no one understands what I'm saying.
I also got into my job by sheer luck. I was at Kelly Carlton's for a year, and the council used to have a sentinel shellfish program where throw mussel rigs in various spots at the mouths of all the major rivers, and then the reference site was at the back of Rangitoto. And my postgrad was all on sentinel, on using biological sentinels for heavy metals. So there was a 3-month contract. Basically, the person who was delivering that left, and they needed someone to pretty much pick up the project and finish it off. And I took that and was supposed to go back to Kelly Collins after that, and in 3 months turned to 10 years. Yeah, and then jumped out, did some consulting, and then came back. So did everything from marine ecology and water quality, hydrology. Now doing badly in terrestrial ecology, but into restoration staff, regulatory staff, so kind of moved around quite a bit.
If this is changing into career advice, take any opportunity you can get. If it's like 1 month, jump in there and just like make yourself known and annoy them. And then all of a sudden, when employment comes up, they're like, oh, she was a bit annoying, but we'll take her because we know her. It's definitely like that. Also, nepotism is rife.
Nepotism is rife, but also there's like a real push to keep people on board who are really familiar with the systems. Like, I know this shouldn't be a requirement for employers, but if you did like a quick 1 month or 3 month little contract, you've been health and safety inducted, you've been HR inducted, you've done all of this stuff. So for them, if they're looking for anyone to do repeat work, it's just so much easier to bring you on, and you'll start tomorrow without going through the first 3 weeks. I mean, you've been through council's health and safety stuff, and
actually on that, volunteer for fucking everything. Am I allowed to swear? I already did. Volunteer for everything, because when we looked at Wednesday's CV, boy did yours stand out. There's the university student here, like, I can tell you spend 90% of your time smoking pot, not going to class. And then like a student who's volunteered and joined every community group. I mean, if you're into terrestrial, go and do everything for forest and bird and get known, because all of those companies work together. The environmental space is tiny. So they put so many people through university, and they're like, we can give 2 of you each year a job. So you got to make yourself stand out to be one of those 2, basically. I don't know what you guys all do, and if you're all in the marine space, but that's the worst one competitiveness wise. So yeah, volunteer everywhere.
If you're not gonna, again, please don't take our advice, because this was complete luck. but from what I've seen, if you're gonna try and work outside of academia, become as generous, like pick up skills, right? Because like if you're looking, for instance, all the teams I've worked in the past, when something pops up, generally there'll be a portfolio of work that you need someone to service. So if it's, say, a marine ecology role, sweet, having someone with a background in marine ecology is super helpful. But that's only one part of the job. Like, that person also has to be so when I was a marine ecologist at the Auckland Council, I was also the lakes guy. I was also the streams water quality guy. I was also a hydrologist on the side. I also had a decent part of the air quality network. So you're expected to do a lot of stuff. And same with consulting. They want someone who a contract comes through or piece of work comes through and you can work on everything.
Same with NIWA.
Yeah, same with NIWA, unless you're in academia and then you want to be specialized in your specific area of interest. But
I have to say, it was a bit of a culture shock when I left uni and I was like, look at my really awesome project on this niche oxygen demand and just this one part of the Maharangi Harbour. And they were like, that's nice, don't care. And I was like, oh, cool. I spent so much time writing that. And like, I'm not gonna say I never used it because it taught me loads, but don't focus so much on the niche skills that you learn in your master's or PhD or whatever you choose to do. Focus on when you get to a stage where you want to get into a career, focus on what you learned from the project. So project design, what you learned, those kinds of things, because trying to sell yourself on the, hey, I can do chemistry, basically doesn't get you a job.
Unless your project's commercially viable, in which case stick to that and milk it for all it's worth. There's been a few people who've come out with masters and PhDs where there was just a very specific product that they offered and they were the only ones in the country to do it and marketed well. Like Chris McBride's one of them, like he's got his own consultancy now, and he's doing very well off a very specific niche that he went down.
I realized this talk changed very quickly into how to get a career in science. Did anyone have anything else about Aotearoa Lakes that you want to know? Yeah. Well, it depends on what you want to do. So our email is nzlakes.org, and I'm sure they can send it out to you at gmail.com. And like, we'd love volunteers. To be fully honest with you, we're pretty well stacked with divers. We don't really need divers. Everyone wants to dive, but you guys are all educated students, so I feel like the skills that you'll have will be a lot better. So anything from project design to data analysis to coming out and helping with the actual ecological part of things on the day would be amazing. We can make room for divers for sure. It's just not the skill that we're like, yeah, please, we really need some more scientists, because it's kind of us too.
the model we're trying to use to get divers right now, because outside of NIWA, scientific diving isn't really taught, and like, you know, so, and it's super resource heavy, and it takes a lot from pretty much the only people who do it from our side is myself and Louise, and so put everyone through this is a real mission, and you kind of have to go through that before you can volunteer with us. So what we're trying to do now is, if you volunteer if that is something you want to do, that's great. But if you can contribute another skill, that's awesome. So it's like Sean, who did this, for instance. So he's a graphic designer, but wanted to get more into survey work because he does a lot of volunteer work for Revive Our Gulf in the Muscle Bed. So it's sweet. Like, I'll do this if you train me. We're like, great, awesome, happy to invest time and effort into, like, you know, heaps and heaps of training, because you can do something that none of us can do.
We're also happy to invest time into training if we get a certain amount of commitment, I guess, because it's a lot of training. I feel like people don't really realize, I'm not a diver, so I don't really realize, but one of my very good friends went through and did it and was like, holy, that was hard. So I think it's quite a high level of training to go through. So if you are happy to invest, say we'll dive once a month for the next 6 months, then that's awesome, because then we can send you out somewhere else to do surveys. Because one thing that we do find really hard is we have amazing technical divers everywhere, but they're engineers, and I'll go and say, please collect me a plant sample, and they'll come back, this actually happened, where I gave them a series of Ziploc bags numbered. So I was like, so easy, obviously they're going to put one plant in each one. They ripped off little leaves of the macrophytes and put them all in one bag, and then shoved it in their pocket, and then brought it to the shore to me, really proud for me to ID. And I was like, cool.
Yeah. So if you did want to dive and you did want to build these skills, because there's part of this is survey techniques and line work and all the rest of it, but what we really need is people to build up familiarity around doing habitat mapping and ecosystem classing and that sort of stuff, where, I mean, you don't have to be super proficient at macrophyte ID and stuff, but just being able to delineate where there's a substrate change at this, along this contour at this bearing, and noting useful stuff. So when you come up with notes, it's not like, oh yeah, I had a sweet dive, there was this patch down there that looked kind of weird. It becomes translatable to, okay, you've all seen this at the specific contour, that has a myth, so we know we can plot that up on a map that this area is different to that, and for what reason. So we need people who have a science brain, who want to commit to doing this, because again, the technical divers are great at performing tasks, but habitat surveys and stuff, not really, or noticing things like signs of anoxia, like, but it would be good to have sciencey people on board. And want to do anything else for us, please?
Yeah. Anything desktop based, we have oodles of.
Yeah, if you like R, please. Please email us, please. Please. We really need help.
I don't think anyone ever likes R.
Someone must.
Cool. Any other questions? Otherwise, I think we'll sit down and we can catch chat, because I feel a bit weird standing up here. Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
All of you marine majors? No. Does any of you